Welcome back. In this video, we're going to walk through how to set up an asset master. Let's start by searching for Asset in the menu. You'll find the Asset Master Setup application there. When we open it, you'll notice that some assets are already defined. But for this demo, we'll create a brand new asset from scratch. To do that, we'll add an asset item to the Asset Master Setup. Now, the items available here come from the Items Management application. Only items classified as fixed assets, like equipment, appear in this list. From these, we'll select the item we want to configure in the Asset Master. In our case, the item is Y7 Yoke 230. We'll go ahead and select that. Next, we'll define its type. Since this is equipment, we'll select equipment as the asset type. Notice that the asset name is automatically pulled in from Items Management. Whatever name or description you gave to the item, it is synced here. You can't change it in Asset Master. This is intentional, because the system keeps both modules aligned, ensuring consistency. So any core information about the item stays in Items Management, while here in Asset Master Setup, we're adding additional details, things that are specific to the asset properties and its management. Next, you'll notice that the group and subgroup are automatically displayed. These values are pulled directly from the Items Management application. Now, what we need to define here is the depreciation rate. This isn't defined in Items Management because it applies only to items classified under the fixed asset category. That's why only fixed assets appear here. Let's say we set the annual depreciation at 10% with a usage cost of 3.8 per hour. Then we move on to provisioning of assets. This is all about how the asset will be issued to the users, whether they're working on projects, inspections, or providing services on-site or offshore. Ultimately, every asset has to be issued to someone who's going to use it, and this section defines how that happens. For instance, if we select Asset Issue, it means the asset is physically handed over by the portfolio owner to the user, and once the work is finished, it must be returned. On the other hand, the scheduling method works a bit differently. Here, the asset doesn't need to be formally issued or returned. Instead, it's considered reserved for the duration of the work, and once the task is complete, it becomes available again automatically. So, if you're working in an environment where you need strict tracking, where assets must be handed out and collected back, the asset issue method is the right choice. But if your setup allows more flexibility, the scheduling method can save time by automating availability once the work is done. Now, the next step is to define routine-related rules. Since we're also setting up routines here, these routines can be for different purposes, like maintenance, calibration, or other activities. In this case, we're selecting a time-bound routine. That means this particular asset item will follow a schedule, based on time intervals. Just to clarify, all these rules are not about a single asset. For example, take the Y7 230 yoke. You might have 200 assets under this one asset item name in the Asset Master. The rules you define here will apply to all of those 200 assets because they belong to the same asset item. So, any routine rules set at the Asset Master level automatically apply across all assets linked to it. That's how consistency is maintained. Along with that, you can also provide remarks to give more context about the routine. Once that's done, we'll save this Asset Master and then move on to adding more details as needed. Now let's add the applicable routines. Each equipment requires some kind of routine, whether it's calibration, preventive maintenance, or even regular cleaning. For this example, we'll select a calibration routine for the yoke. This routine is scheduled every 180 days, which means it repeats on a 6-month cycle. The time required to complete this routine is about 2 hours. Next, we define who will carry it out. It can either be handled by an internal team, outsourced to an external vendor, or even a mix of both if needed. For now, we'll go with the internal team option. This is the first routine we're applying to this item. Notice that no material is required here. However, if the routine involves replacing parts, using consumables like grease, brushes, or cleaning materials, you can add those either at the routine level or at the asset master level, whichever is more relevant. You can also define approved vendors, but that's only necessary if the routine is outsourced or set as mixed. Since this one will be executed internally, we don't need to add vendors here. Now, let's add another routine, this time the annual calibration cycle for the equipment. This one is scheduled every 365 days. For this, we'll configure it as outsourced or mixed. Mixed means the calibration can be done internally if resources are available, or by a vendor if internal teams are occupied. For example, Arabia is one of the regular vendors that usually handles this type of calibration. When selecting a service vendor, you'll also need to link a service item, since that's used later when creating a job order, purchase order, or service order for the vendor. In this case, we'll link it to magnetic yoke calibration services. You can also define vendor tasks here, task 01, task 02, task 03, or simply write a continuous description that outlines the broader scope of work the vendor is expected to perform. The detailed execution steps are already defined in the routine, but this section lets you capture extra instructions or scope if needed. Once saved, we can define the approved vendors. For instance, Vendor 1, VacMat Arabia. Rate type per service. Lead time 7 days. Cost $280 per inspection. Vendor 2, Taraco UAE. Rate type per service. Lead time 14 days. Cost $560 per inspection. This way, you've got multiple options for outsourcing, and the system will reflect them. Now, remember, different types of yokes like Y6, Y5, Y7B, etc. may have different calibration routines, vendors, or material requirements. What we've configured here is specifically for this asset master. But if you want, you can also group multiple yokes under one asset master and apply the same routines across all of them. It really depends on how you want to organize your configuration, whether by type, requirement, or vendor setup. That's all for this video. In the next sessions, we'll continue with more demonstrations and dive deeper into routine and asset configurations. Thanks for watching, and see you in the upcoming videos.